Oh, hey guys. I just saw that we popped up there.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here for Beard of Darkness book reviews. I'll tell you, it's one of those things that I found in this community. I was talking to Krystle before we came on here about Connor and
Yeah.
how I kind of met her through the conversation I have with Connor. You need no introduction, but how are you tonight, Krystle Matar?
I'm doing really good, thank you. I picked today of all days to paint my living room, so I'm feeling very accomplished. So there's
Yes.
a little bit of housekeeping, and then a little bit of business over here, and then a hanging out. So it feels like a good day. There's
Yeah, so
Connor.
I'll tell you if yeah, I seen him over here. I said I was telling Krystle Connor before we came on. I said there was a few people who I know were going to be here. Connor, you were
Yeah.
absolutely one of them, brother. Thank you for being here, man. Lovely to see everybody here. I'll throw you guys up here in just a second. I want to start with the lovely Krystle because I'll tell you, there's those books that you hear about, and then there's those books that you hear about. And I hear Andy Peliquin talking about it. I hear so many.
Oh yeah.
Tom Bookbeard, he had a great question earlier. I'll throw that up there here in a little bit that he asked because it was a pretty good one. But if you would kind of go into Tainted Dominion, the series, and give us an overview, like the subgenre, the whole spiel, if you would.
Yeah, I can do that. So the first book, Legacy of the Brightwash, is a Spiffbo 7 finalist. I finished second my year, so um, that was pretty intense. We were very closely linked, the top three of us our
Oh
year.
my god!
Um, and so Brightwash is like a little bit Gaslamp, a little bit murder mystery, but also grimdark, and also romance, and also what was the last one? Epic fantasy. There we go.
I love
So
that.
it starts with the main character Toshway finding the body of a child that has been killed, um, washed up on the bank of the Brightwash, and it kind of sets off like this whole questioning of the status quo. Hi, Bex. Um, so he starts questioning, his role in the society that he lives in that he hadn't questioned sufficiently before. And it's kind of like a rise to rebellion sort of story where the questions get harder and harder to answer, and he gets angrier and angrier as he goes. And then so the second one that came out last year, I guess, since it's 2024 now, Brick and Bone is the big. That's where the story blows out into epic fantasy, because we add some point of views, yeah,
Your big
and
ones.
we get like deeper into the politics of all the stuff that Toshway fucked up when when he did all the stupid things that he did in the first book. Um, and yeah, that's what we've got so far.
I love that. So I'll tell you a couple things that you notice before you know exactly like the blurb, if you would, or what Crystal's inspirations were. Are these beautiful and they're very
Oh
unique
yeah.
covers? Oh my gosh, they're just gorgeous, guys.
Yeah,
Uh,
Brad, I feel like in so many ways my journey to publishing is just like little gifts that the universe gave me along the way, because just by accident I made friends with other indie writers before I even knew that I wanted to self-publish. And by accident I made friends with Nick Borelli, who kind of launched me into the circle of the people that I'm friends with now. And then through Nick, I met Justine Bergman, who isn't on Twitter anymore. She's much more comfortable on Instagram now.
okay.
Um, but she was big in the indie review space way way back in ye old times of 2020,
Ye old
2019.
times.
Yeah. And then her husband, Brad, is a designer. He's an artist. He's incredible. And I remember I saw some art that she shared that he did um, that she has framed in her house. And I remember thinking to myself, like, man, if ever I self-publish, I'd love to get him as a cover artist. I wonder if he'd do it. And so just by happenstance, all these steps along the way. And it turned out, yeah, he would do it. And these are the books these are the covers that he came up with that I mean, I know they're my books, but man, I love those covers so much. And he's so good at listening to me babble and then coming up with, that
Sure.
art. So
I love that story. First, I have to say, I have to put that on a shirt. My wife's a graphic designer. You said coming into publishing is gifts the universe just gave me a little bit at a time. I love that because, man,
yeah,
it just beautiful. I don't know. It's like you're an author or something.
yeah. It's like I do words sometimes.
I can see you've worked your way around a sentence a time or two.
Yeah.
So I have to say, I hear gritty. I hear romance. I hear these boxing as another part.
Oh man, sorry to interrupt. My favorite thing about the feedback to Brick and Bone is all the people who are like pleasantly surprised that they enjoyed a book about boxing. Because I don't know, I never thought about it as a strange thing to put in a fantasy book. It just felt natural to the time period, the Victorian time period, because pugilism was so big, and it felt like it fit. But then I remember that I'm writing fantasy novels, and I kicked it to a fantasy crowd, and they're like, how did she get me to like a book about boxing? I was like, yes.
So I have to say just a couple things about that. I love it, first of all, and I'm so glad you said that, because that's not the first thing we think of, right? When we think of an epic or a grimdark fantasy, but it's those curveballs or those turning the genre a little bit on its head, those are those memorable stories. And that's very much so what I have heard. And I've started this. This is a 2024 read for me. I'm very excited, not only because I wouldn't say that I am a huge boxing fan, but I am a huge MMA fan. Boxing,
oh yeah,
that type of thing is part of it. I would lose my rear end to any boxer with any like a 2 or 3 days training. You would knock this bald head around a few times, I promise. But I find those nuances. For instance, boxing in this story or in a science fiction, it's just something that isn't typically there. I absolutely fall for those type of things. Sorry for the little bit of a rant that I was saying about the inspirations behind creating the Tainted Dominion. Like, what birthed these 2 books and what's to come?
Okay. Well, I guess there's a couple of different answers. Firstly, is Toshue is a character that I've been writing about since I was, I think 14 is what I tracked down. So now over 20 years.
Guys, I had to throw that in there. I prepared for that answer. I was just guessing, but I love that you said that because I had no idea. It says to Toshue. By the way, I've absolutely been saying that wrong, and it sounds so much nicer as Toshue than Tashu. In my head, in my ignorant head, I'm like, Tashu. Okay, Toshue sounds so much nicer. Thank you for telling me that. But I love the dedication.
Yeah, 18 years.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and that was a couple of years ago. Yeah, and it just writing about him. I'm gonna get heavy for a second, but writing about him saved me from a pretty dark period of my life, where for a short period of time, he was kind of the only thing I had to hang on to. And so as I evolved as a writer, I kept going back to telling stories about him just because I felt like he had something to say. And earlier I hadn't figured out what just yet. And so he's been in a couple of different genres. He's been in a couple of different cities. He spent some time as a cop, in some really, really badly written police procedurals. And he just kind of evolved with me as I grew. But as I was writing about him, I really missed fantasy as a genre. And so previously I'd been choosing one or the other. You know, I would write a fantasy novel and I would get frustrated with it and I would miss Toshway. So I would go back to writing Toshway in contemporary novels. And eventually I would get frustrated with those and I would miss fantasy. So I would jump back. And eventually I decided, like, why am I doing this to myself? Why am I choosing one or the other? Why can't it be both? So I jumped Toshway into a fantasy world that I already created just to try to get some traction. And at the time, the individual inspiration for Brightwash specifically, we were seeing a big surge of electric vehicles, electric powered vehicles. And there was so much marketing about how they're going to save, you know, the whole world because they're electric instead of gasoline. And I guess I'm just really contrarian. And I was like, but it's still a problem. Like the way we commute and the way these electric vehicles take resources and how we power our society, it's still a problem. Like electric vehicles are a step in the right direction, maybe, but it's not the end all and be all of, you know, saving the climate, saving the environment. And it bugged me that the news articles at the time were talking about how they were so important. And certainly it's a good thing. Like, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I felt like their impact was overblown. But that started thinking, like, well, I drive, like, what am I willing to do? Like, am I going to give up my car? You know?
Sure.
And what would it take to have fewer cars on the road? Well, it would take a total overhaul of most North American cities, because North American cities are geared around cars. We don't have very good public transit. We don't have good walking spaces. And so, like, I was just thinking, like, all of these changes would have to happen just to reduce cars on the road. So it's like, what's the cost of convenience? What are we willing to accept for an easy ride to work? And so jump that into a fantasy novel. I know this sounds totally non sequitur, but I swear there's a point. So I jumped that into a fantasy novel and I was like, okay, well, an industrial revolution, but we're powering it by magic instead of coal, as we did. And so I kind of pushed it to the extremes of, like, okay, so what are they basing their revolution on? It's magic. But if they're having industrial quarters based on magic, then they need the people who are capable of using magic to be super obedient. One might even say they need them to be slaves. And so it set off all of this world building of how bad would it get before people noticed, and what would people be willing to accept for the tram ride to work so that they could live. And it just set off all of these questions and all of this world building. And to say too much will be to spoil the end of Brightwash, so I won't say much more than that. But it's all based on that question of, like, what are we willing to accept to keep the status quo, and how bad does the status quo have to get for us to say, okay, hang on, stop. And so a lot of that is in Brightwash, yeah.
So lots of things, if I can remember them, because you've said quite powerful things, quite impactful things to me personally, and you know, I like to talk about those things as well. It's like, you take a problem, or you've got these thoughts about that problem, and in your mind you may not so I'm going to speak from me personally. Let's just say a social aspect like the cars. In your head, you're building this world already. I love hearing those foundational stories, because for somebody like me who wants to find that spark, you know, like you hear so many authors like it's just that idea that wouldn't leave me. Of course, man. But where did that idea come from? Because I have a
Yeah.
bunch of little ideas, but like that main striving point is kind of where I'm struggling. And
I
I love that you took that. But
I think um part of it for me is having the basis of the characters that I wanted to write about. Um and it's what gave Brightwash the staying power that my other previous attempts at writing fantasy didn't have, where the story was built to be a story that Toshue could impact specifically. Because to me, I can come up with 1,000 different concepts of like big world building, but stories are most interesting at their root in the individual people.
mm,
And so deciding the journey that he was going to go on um gave it like a human resonance that stayed with me even when I was having a really hard time with it, and it carried me through like the I'm not smart enough to tell a story like this. I don't know what I'm doing, and all of those things. And so ideas get weight when you put people there,
mm.
for
Ooh,
me personally.
stories gain weight when you put. I love that. So I have to say, and I'm speaking as a reader, okay? Uh, some of my favorite books, a guy, of course, that everybody talks about, but there's a reason I feel for that, and I absolutely love it. Joe Abercrombie.
Oh yeah.
He just writes those characters. Another guy, Mike Shackle, he writes characters that are like terrible, and then you still find yourself like, oh man, yeah, I just really don't
Yeah.
want that guy to die though. Like, I want to see some part of his life be cool. Like,
Yeah, they're compelling. Yeah, compelling characters. Abercrombie's a good example because I don't actually know what any of his books are about, but I can name a bunch of characters that people talk about. And I
yes.
have some of his books. They're on my TBR, I swear. And it's the way people talk about his characters that has interested me, like the fact that they're so memorable and so um I don't know. It's that weight again, like that people are talking about the characters that interests me.
Before I knew that, something I find I hear authors put a lot of weight on, and I totally get it. Like, when a reader tells you that through dialogue you can name that character,
Oh
that's
yeah,
man, that's talent, right? So I before I knew that was a thing, I could absolutely do that with his character Logan. He's got a crew
yeah,
of guys that I am not full through the first trilogy yet, but a crew of guys that just you can tell they all real gritty, kind of dirty guys that they
yeah,
they just kind of make their way through the world. But each one is a little bit different. They're witty. One's a little bit kind of soft. He's kind of a coward. And but yeah, through dialogue, I love that the building of a character, anything that kind of makes you go, man, I've really felt that way before.
yeah, yeah.
So and one other point, real quick, if you don't mind, is
Quick.
you told me that Toshue brought you through a time in your life where you needed Toshue.
Yeah,
And that sort of relationship with a character, your creativity, it just is so deep seated, and I can tell that makes you happy. That's something you do for fun, and you're proud of it. That's very very cool, and I respect that, and I think that's really awesome. I just kind of want to throw that out there that
okay.
it's to find that sort of love in a character that brings your creativity out, and
Yeah.
just really cool to hear. Um, Also, something I also find very cool is, were you young when you first started reading, when you found your love for literature?
Yeah. I'm gonna say the thing, like I've always been a reader. My parents met at a Dungeons and Dragons game. Like, so it's
That's
like
awesome.
it's in my DNA, right? It's in my genome a little bit. And my dad always had books around. My mom always had different books around. But for me, the book specifically that I think turned me into a writer are David Gemmell novels.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I think I was 12 the first time somebody bought me a David Gemmell novel. It was Midnight Falcon, which is the second book in his Regantia series, which is like really super Scottish inspired. And David Gemmell was different from my dad's fantasy, because my dad read a lot of the type of fantasy that, you know, had certainly had its impact, but the characters, the heroic characters, were always kind of shiny. The narrative knew that these guys were good and doing the right thing and making the right choices. And I couldn't relate to that.
Okay, no, I get it.
So, so I liked fantasy, but like it didn't touch me the same way it got my dad. And then I read David Gemmell, and Bane the Bastard has this hatred in him, and he has this bitterness in him, but also he's trying, like he does good things, he does the wrong thing, and he's like muddling through. And I felt so connected to that. And then he ends up the hero kind of in spite of his flaws. And that was the fantasy that turned me into a writer. I was like, I want to do this. This is me. And then so the rest of that series is the same way, where and I guess that's a lot more common now, which is really awesome. But at the time, I hadn't read anything like it, and so that's what changed. I was 12, and then at around 14 is when I started writing Toshway, and he was not a great guy.
Well, it's those.
Then, yeah.
It's those stories. The one that you're telling, for you it was David Gemmell. For somebody else, it was this author. That's why I absolutely love to ask it, because, you know, I'd say, I think the way that your father and mother had books around is something that I hope my kids say about me when I'm gone, and I'm emanating that, and that is how it is now. And I wish that would have been me. Like, my mom and dad, like, were great parents. Don't get me wrong, but it wasn't. Reading wasn't a part of it. I did my schoolwork, this and that, but I think
I didn't do my schoolwork.
I can very much relate. And it's funny because, like, out of the 20 books I was supposed to read in high school, I promise I didn't read a single one. I thought, like, if you'd have told me in high school that I'd be talking about books with authors on YouTube, I'd have probably, like, no.
Yeah, you wouldn't. No way. Yeah.
So it's just cool to hear that. I think that building that imagination at a younger age, and especially, you know, eventually writing, that has a lot to do with it. Obviously, it's you found this love and connection with a character in your shoes, and man, these stories may be different that I hear from authors, but it kind of always touches the same area. It's like, I found this character or this author that he made me feel something. Yeah. Whether it was through the character or how much I loved the world or the thematic elements. Foundational stories will forever be where I have my heart. So thank you for sharing that. And it's very cool. And David Gemmell is a guy that I've not read a single word. And I'm very excited too.
He seems to be really niche. Certainly in the UK, he's much bigger than he is here. And I notice quite a lot of authors that I look up to also trace themselves back to him, like Anthony Ryan, in his book, Blood Song. Is that what? Oh God, sorry, Anthony.
I think so. It is. I think it is.
Yeah. So I'd stopped reading fantasy for about 10 years, through my early 20s, I guess, and partially because David Gemmell had passed away and he wasn't writing anymore, obviously. And it was hard for me to connect to other fantasy that was coming out because I just wanted more of his work, and it wasn't going to happen. So I switched over to other genres for quite a long time, and then that feeling of missing fantasy came back, and I started going into the fantasy section at my local bookstore more often, kind of like,
Get
what are they up
lost.
to these days? Yeah, it's been 8-10 years. And I remember I picked up an Anthony Ryan book, and I look at acknowledgments when I'm trying to decide who to buy. I don't know why,
Sure.
I can't explain it.
Oh, you're very much not alone.
Yeah, I'm glad to see that. I've seen it since getting online. I've seen other people's, but anyway, I opened it up to the acknowledgments, and in it he said, and to the late great David Gemmell, who inspired my writing journey, and I was like, that's it, I'm sold.
That's it.
I'm done. And reading his books, there were a couple little Easter eggs in that book where it's like certain names were like a little tip of the hat, and it felt like I had been away from home for 10 years, and I'd finally come back. So yeah, that's to say,
That's fate.
Yeah,
That's great.
yeah,
It's like, okay, I'm really missing this. And the guy that I did read, he's just natural causes have taken effect. He's not here no more.
yeah.
The written word from him no longer goes on. And then you pick this book up and it just pays up like homage to him. I mean, that's fate.
It
Love
has to be, right? And that's another one of the gifts of along the way, because like, how many hundreds of other books were on the shelf at the time,
It's astounding.
Yeah.
It is, because like you said, there's hundreds of other books you could have picked up. So that feeling when you read that, I can just imagine. And by the way, I want to say, I'm so glad to hear people open up and read acknowledgments. There's a guy in the chat right now that anytime I read his dedication, I believe. So I like both acknowledgments and dedications. But particularly Ryan. I was just going to say Ryan Skeffington. He's in the the chat. He's got a sci-fi book out, and it's called Lost Souls, and it still brings a tear to my eye. Anytime I read his dedication, it's wonderful. I'm talking with him Sunday, so I'll read it then. But anyway, if you guys want a nice, it's great. Pick it up. It's Lost Souls by Ryan Skeffington. It's a great book too. You make a grown man cry, Ryan.
That's all we're trying for around here.
And that's
the dream.
Yeah, and it kind of leads into something back in the chat. I meant to go back up to it earlier. We have some people over here. Wonderful. And this is absolutely not the first time I've heard this. Let me find it. We're live, guys. This is what happens.
The chat is hopping. You guys are awesome.
I will find it. Give me 2 seconds, guys. Bear with me. I had it. I think it was Connor. No. It was Mike. Here it is. No, it ain't. Sorry. It was Michael Roberti. Krystle still hasn't apologized for making all of us cry. If I can find, there's a cool.
Sorry.
And there was some really good banter going on. If I here, a little bit make you cry on your way home from work. If I do find it, I'll throw it back up there, guys. I'm so sorry that I lost it. It was a bunch of wonderful, paying homage to your wonderful book, because any written word or movie or music that can evoke that emotion again, especially, there's not many books that I've read. In fact, I can't think of one that's made me cry, and I'm not a tough guy. I'm not saying that at all. In fact, I'm searching for that one. His dedication did, but as far as, getting into a book and just starting to sob, that just hasn't happened for your man here. If you have any recommendations, throw them at me, because it's nice. You can enjoy a good cry every now and then.
I'm trying to think what did it for me recently, but I can't remember. Anytime somebody asks me a question like that, I immediately forget.
Oh my gosh, you have that too?
Yeah.
And it's funny, like, even if whoever I'm talking to tomorrow, it's like at the end of my chat, so it's like, okay, I've got to go through this thing where like, share, subscribe, and then talk about who I'm talking to next. I could rehearse it 1,000 times, but if you ask me at the end, it's like, it's over. It's like I never remember.
Yeah.
Okay, so before you were a writer, What about fantasy? And I know this is a very broad genre, guys. So I know that this is a kind of a difficult question. But where is it in a fantasy book or the fantasy genre that you pay most attention that really captures you? So what I mean, characters,
Oh, that's a good
world
question.
building, is it the magic system that really brings that story home for you personally?
I think I mean, it has to be characters, and certainly that's probably not very much a surprise because I do read. I still read quite a lot of genres right now, and before I was a writer, I think I still read quite a few genres, and certainly the magic of fantasy is that it lets us ask questions from a safe distance.
Hmm.
Um, because we're asking questions that are relevant to us, but we're not necessarily putting any specific instance of our existence on blast. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I instead of writing an essay about electric vehicles, which I don't know enough about to have that many opinions, I got to bring all of the things that confused me to a world where I could make the rules and I could put like a barrier between myself and um, the real world and ask the questions while I'm telling a story instead of writing a dissertation on
Mm.
other things. And I think to me that's the appeal that always brings me back to fantasy specifically, and why I've always kind of failed as being a contemporary writer. Um,
I think.
because even recently I had an idea for a story that would be urban fantasy contemporary. It takes place in our time, but stuff just keeps happening, man, and I can't keep up. I can't make this this stuff up. Like I don't know how to compete with
No, I
the real
really,
world.
I kind of, I'm grasping. This is the way I'm taking it, and I can relate with it in a way. It's like, um, say for us personally, you hear you're reading a story, and there's a bigger theme behind it. Lots of
Yeah,
symbolism. I find those particularly intriguing because on the surface, it's a story that is very A, B, C, D
it's
things
got
happen,
yeah.
but there's depth to it.
Yeah, I the same for me. I think that's what brings me back to fantasy specifically, as a writer, and as a reader as well, where we have the chance to ask these rhetorical questions,
Mm.
and make stories about people that are still very resonant to us. Um, and we can have these conversations, but we can also tell these really amazing human stories.
I like
Yeah,
what Brian said, man, and I've seen so many versions of this, and I think it's great because, man, I was just talking about this with my wife, just similar topics, and just a lot about how, well, it's all encompassing, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. My brain's a little on overdrive, but I find the fantasy for me encompasses so many themes. And one of my very favorite is what Brian D. Anderson, the Renegade Bard here. Wonderful chat last night, my friend. You can tackle racism using
yeah,
genuinely different races. And what that does is detach anything you could personally take personal, or somebody else could take
yeah,
personal in this story, and talk about a matter kind of from a lens.
yeah. You zoom out a bit, yeah,
Yes.
and it's something that I was able to do with my magic users too, because for anyone who hasn't read Brightwash, the magic users go by two names: either people who respect it and magic, and they call each other the talented. They have talent with kind of changing the natural world in subtle ways. Or you have the term that the authority uses against them, and they call them tainted, as in they're, Will Tushway's son says that um, they call us bad meat, you know, as if we're rotten because of what we can
Ooh.
do. And so Tashua's son is not happy with the status quo. And it was an accident, but it was also really it turned out to be obviously a huge theme throughout the novel, where it's just this push and pull between what do we even call people who are different and arguably valuable and
Ooh.
special, you know, and but because the nation needs them to be a slave class, they've used language as a way to grind them down, and laws as a way to grind them down. But I'm talking about magic. It's not
It's a way
it
to
gives
disconnect it a little bit
exactly,
and
yeah,
talk
it's
about it
that
from a broader lens.
it's that barrier, right, where I can talk about things that I believe in, but also it's a little bit of a protective
Yes.
boundary, a demilitarized zone
Yeah,
between
no, I
what I'm
totally
trying to
get
talk
that.
about. Yeah,
Because, you know, one of the things that is, you know, really big nowadays is, you know, everybody's afraid to kind of hurt somebody's feelings. And here at Beard of Darkness, everybody is welcome and everybody is loved. So nobody's feelings is getting hurt here. And that's not, but I find a lot of people kind of mute themselves or are afraid to be themselves in fear that everybody might not like them. And I like
yeah,
when a fantasy story takes that, because one of my favorite things in somebody is a difference. You know, a lot of people use that as a reason, and we've seen this in history and lots of
oh
different
yeah,
things. Yeah, oh, you're different. That just means that we can't get along, or that
yeah,
I should hate on this part of you. That's the exact opposite with me. It's like I'm used to what I'm used to. Introducing what you're used to that's different than my everyday is completely intriguing to me.
yeah,
And I love how fantasy captures that and talks about it in a way that is, like you said perfectly, a demilitarized zone. And
yeah,
that really says it perfectly. And it goes back a little bit what Connor says here. It's the fun thing about fantasy is that it can make metaphors
yeah,
tangible. Leave it to Connor to just really say in like
yeah.
7 or 8 words what I just said in like 500.
Me too. Yeah,
Love it, man. Thank you, Connor, for saying that.
that's why his book's shorter than mine.
Oh man, and congrats, right, to Connor, one of
Yeah,
10 of the
yeah. He's
300
Spitbo this year.
finalists. So I
Yeah,
think that's wonderful. So again, this is the first year that I've paid attention to Spiffbo, known what it was, any of that. So you were talking a little about your. It was last year Spiffbo that Brightwash was in.
no, it was cycle 7. So that's two
Okay,
years
so two
ago.
years ago.
Yeah,
So I
yes.
just have to say and throw
I
it
had
out.
to do the math really quick.
Out of 300 books, guys, I
Yeah,
just find it amazing to be part of that short list at the end. It's just truly something I think you
the
should all be proud about.
little piece of trivia that I really love is that Connor and I were both selected by the same judge. So
I don't know her name, but
Connor,
I picture her.
yeah, Becky,
Becky.
Becky, yeah. So Connor was in Becky's batch this year, and I was in Becky's batch back in cycle 7. So um,
That's
the
very
joke
cool.
between us is that Peter and Tashway are Becky's boys.
I love that, you know,
Yeah,
and I honestly before, so I remember the day that Connor dropped that he was a finalist, and I did not know about Becky, and it's just cool. And we're speaking a little about this backstage, if you will,
yeah,
before we came live. This community, right? It's just
it's
you said it
amazing.
perfectly. They just keep showing up for
They
the
show up,
people.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
It's very humbling, but also very welcoming, and you know, it's
it's
it's a
the whole
great
deal.
community.
It is.
I'm home here in a way that I've never I can't say I've ever felt through my long 35 question mark years. I don't remember how old I am.
I do that all the time. It's like, when was I born? I totally get it.
Yeah, I don't
And
know.
I find that that's the best way to talk about it. It takes that broader part of I don't know. We all love to read, and then fantasy, and
Yeah,
it as along with that which is lovely in itself. All of these people who I've never seen competition like you go to I don't know, race car driver lives in
Yeah.
Ohio. So when people talk about NASCAR and shit here. NASCAR, people are head to head. It comes to the indie fantasy community. Everybody's like, let's go to the top together, guys. Let's go.
Yeah.
I'm going to help you. You're helping me. It's just a wonderful thing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The more people respect the indie sphere as a whole, the better it is for all of us. And so us working together to lift, the indie star as it were, it shines on all of us, right? So
Very cool. It's a way that I have absolutely, like you said, I haven't felt at home in a very long time with
yeah.
certain things in my life, and this community does it. So one of the things that I absolutely love to chat about is your process. So let's say you may be doing this right now. We'll talk about that here in a second, but you're in the grind. You're writing a novel. What is your day-to-day process? Do you have one that are you strict, kind of laid back?
I mean, I try I I want to be strict with myself. I really want to be the person that sits down 7 days a week, because I love it. I just I feel more human when I'm writing. However, I have 4 children, and I homeschool them partially
Wow.
because the oldest two have had a lot of learning disabilities.
Okay.
And when they were in school, these many years ago, the disabilities weren't diagnosed yet, so the school couldn't help them.
Sure.
And it just wasn't working for us. So I pulled them out and started doing it myself. Um, and then we got the diagnoses, so then I was able to help them myself. And then when the littles came along, it was just natural. And then the world changed for some reason in 2020. So it just kind of stayed that way, where the 4 of us or the 5 of us are at home most of the time. So with all of that said, it's really hard to have a super
Mm.
schedule with writing.
Yeah.
Um, but I find I do my best work when I'm stressed out about deadlines.
Okay.
um, so um, I can hustle really hard if I've got a deadline, and if I don't have a deadline, I don't hustle nearly
Are
enough.
you a procrastinator?
I really am. I
Oh
really,
my
really am.
gosh. Isn't it the
Yeah,
worst? I'm the same.
it's it and it the frustrating thing is, like, it's so stressful when I'm racing a deadline. So I told myself, okay, well, I won't set any deadlines this time, and I'll just get it done, and it's not getting done. It's not getting done at all. So I don't know. I don't know.
You like to have
So
that pressure.
yeah, I thrive under pressure and also slowly go insane.
Mm.
But I noticed somebody asked if I have a word count goal,
No.
and I'm gonna say yes. um I if I would like minimum 1,000 words a day. I give myself the weekend off, so 5 days a week. That's
Oh,
ideally 5,000 words a week. um However, I also I edit as I go, so I'll write up until I'm annoyed with my writing, and then I'll stop, and I'll print it out, and I'll edit it to fix it, because I find I have to know what happened to know where I'm going. And
yeah.
if I've messed up somewhere, I gotta fix it or I can't keep going. So then I try to do a certain amount of editing every day in the morning. Um, and then once it's fixed, I can keep going back to 1,000 words a day. And it's like when you sketch, you do the really basic shapes first, and then you kind of erase and do better shapes, and
Yeah.
then erase again and better shape. So that's what my writing looks like. It's a lot of stop start, but by the end I have a draft that's in pretty good shape and is legible to other human eyes.
I have to say, so when I first knew that I wanted to write, it's like I have this part of me that sits down and I'm writing and things are coming to me and I like the way it sounds when I read it back to myself. But then the next day comes, that dreaded next day,
Yeah.
and I haven't gotten very far into any of like any works, if you will, because of this, what I'm about to say. And it's, I find myself going back and doing what you do, which I can't believe you do that, because I think that's amazing. You edit as you're going, because I found that I can't, maybe I'm a little too much of a perfectionist if I,
No, so okay, I'm sorry. I should stop cutting you off. But every time you
no,
say something,
please.
I started out. Um, I had to force myself to stop editing. So many years ago now, the very first draft of Brightwash, I was doing the same thing where stop, start, stop, start. But at the time, I didn't know where I was going. So all the stopping and starting didn't get me closer to it. It just got me messed up. So earlier in my journey as a writer, I had to force myself just to finish the draft and just accept that it was going to be really bad. Um, like that first draft of Brightwash, I decided it wasn't even called that yet, and I decided that a certain character had to die um, about 6 chapters ago for this chapter that I was working on to make sense the way it did. And so I just kept writing as if that had happened. I just left a note, XYZ has to die approximately this chapter. And then I kept going as if that were true. And so if you read it, it none of it makes any sense except for all these notes that I left for myself, but then it was done.
Mm,
And I knew where I was going.
sure.
And once I knew where I was going, I could go back and fix it. And that's the difference between me then. I didn't know where I was going, so all the fixing it didn't help, and me now where I I know what this series needs to be. I know the ending that I'm working towards in each individual book, and I know myself as a writer and what I'm trying to write about. And so now I can edit as I go. But until you know what you're writing about, not just what happens XYZ, but also the themes and the character journeys that you want to talk about, until you know those things, you can't fix it because you don't know.
Ooh. I
So I would
I'm
say just finish the draft. It's going to be bad. It's going to be terrible, but it's okay because once it's finished, you know what you need to fix.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because in my mind you're just like this person who is like just like that superior being that can just so, I love that you reiterated and made it a little deeper, because I think that so to me that makes a lot of sense. If you don't know exactly where you're going and you've
Yeah.
grown as a writer, you've got this knowledge
Yeah.
from experience. Thank you for inserting that, because to me, I've tried to edit as I go, kind of what I initially thought, and
Yeah.
it just, I don't know if that's a big hill to climb, and
The
I'm but
the thing about editing is you have to know the problems that you're fixing, or
mm,
else you're just kind of treading water, right? Until you know those things, until you know the themes you're trying to hit, the character voices that you need. Like if I write a scene and I'm like, this doesn't suit Lauren at all, then I can fix it because I know him. But I didn't know him until I had a couple of drafts of Brightwash done, right? And so when you're starting out, you have to just accept that you don't know things and just let it be bad. And then once you have a project that's finished, you can start making decisions like, okay, um, this character is all over the map, but I liked him the most when he was this way, and then you can go through and fix him so that he's consistent. Um, or I thought I was writing about war, but it turns out I'm writing about grief. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to fix these character arcs tackling. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And usually you're not going to know those things until you have a first draft out. So just let it be bad. It's okay.
And that make, like I said, that makes total sense. To me, I have no experience of my feel, the tone with this character. You know,
Yeah.
You're very much telling me exactly what I think I need. It's funny because I get a lot of answers to questions that I don't ask, and it's like, how can I ask these questions better in the future? Because that information that you gave me is so helpful, and I've written.
I'm glad.
Yeah, and I don't know if I could have asked a question to get that. You know what I mean? Like the answers I get to the questions I have never come in form of a question. It's always the experience I hear from an author. So I wanted to thank you for sharing that, because that helped me.
I think that goes to the same theme of, you know, you don't know what you don't know until you're there and you're in the moment, and then the feedback you get kind of clicks you into what you're trying to say. And I feel like writing is the same thing, where our first drafts were really just flailing, and it's normal. It's so normal to just flail your way through a bad, inconsistent word vomit first draft. But once you get to the end, then you start to have it's like you have a map of where you want to be, and you can start marking down those
I'm gonna get that first draft out. I'm gonna get it out. I think I need to get it
definitely.
out.
Yeah, and you know, that's what I did with Brightwatch. And man, it was bad, and man, it was a lot of words, but it taught me what I wanted to talk about. And that's the first draft job is for you to figure out what you want the story to be, and then you can go and make it.
I love that and it makes sense to somebody who wants to take that journey. I like what Soul Free Wolf says. He says, I love how so many of the authors here show us how human they are to those of us who are aspiring.
Yeah, we all start out kind of the same, aspiring, you know, the same, not knowing things. And certainly my biggest hurdle in finishing drafts was I would read books by people that I admire and go like, wow, their prose is so good, the world building is so complex, I don't think I could ever do anything like this. Because we read the finished product. We read, the editors have had it, the beta readers have had it, the you know, the experts that they paid to consult on, you know, horses in the Middle Ages have had it. And so we're trying to meet that in our first drafts, and it's not fair. It's not fair to ourselves. That's not how this business works.
Oh my gosh, my head was just flooded with this amazing what you're saying right now is don't have expectations based on a finished book, because that process the author took to get there looks nothing like what you think it does.
Right. And it's the same I mentioned before, it's like drawing, you know. My great grandparents were fantastic artists. And they would take their canvases out into various places in the world in nature, and they would do really terrible pencil sketches of the barn or the boat or the pond that they wanted to paint, and they would leave themselves notes about colors on the canvas, and then they would, and so when you see it happening in the field, it's terrible. It's just a bunch of random lines. And then they would go home and they would do layer by layer. They would erase the pencil and put in beautiful watercolors. And then they would hit the gallery with their finished products. And so
hit the gallery.
Literally, like my Nana was at the art gallery quite a few times with her watercolors. But you can't compare yourself to the finished product that's on the gallery wall, because there's all those pencil marks that you can't see anymore.
Man, I'm telling you, I don't say this often, but some of the points that you've made have really resonated with me. And embrace that process is one of the biggest things I hear too. Like, there's processes to all of these, whether it's art, like you're talking, which that's amazing. I to know that about your ancestors and to be able to, do you have like these paintings? You get to see them? You ever saw
I
them?
do. I do. I have quite a few. I can post a picture of the couple that I have
I
in my
would
dining
love
room.
that.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I can go grab a picture after. Yeah.
that's incredible. So you have this this piece of art, whether it's a book or watercolors, and learning that process. And more than just that, like the person that has found this process. Okay, so they know that they can do these little line drawings, and
Yeah.
that end process through experience is going to give them that end product that they want. And I
Yeah.
think that's so important. Gosh, just kind of taking that all in. I'm gonna watch this episode a few times just because I love that point. Um, so yeah, very profound. I've seen a wonderful comment over here. I'll throw it back up. One of the things that I've not yet perfected, because it's part of this process of going live, is throwing these wonderful comments up
Yeah.
as they come in.
Especially they're hopping over there. Like there's a lot
And
going on. It's
it's
hard
so
to.
wonderful. That's part of the community we were talking about.
Yeah.
So the nerd book review.
Oh.
That's a wonderful question. Thank you for being here, by the way. How many books are you planning for the Tainted Dominion?
I think it's gonna be 5 total. Possibly 6, depending on who I include in the big dramatic parts near the end. Because Brightwash was always meant to be the story that kicked off the epic fantasy war that I wanted to write about, but it took me a little bit longer than I expected to get there. So book 3 is going to be kind of the last one that takes place in Yalesmere. And then after that, we kick off into the wide scale where the characters just scatter for war reasons. No spoilers. So
Yeah.
I'm going to say 5 or 6. But I also like to kind of stop and pause and do some smaller standalones in between. So there's going to be lots of Dominion content for quite a while. Yeah, probably close to a few million words.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Guys,
yeah.
one of my favorite things about a book before I pick it up is that chunk, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because based on experience, a little bit of what we've talked about, it's like I've read these big epic fantasy novels. I've read short ones that are wonderful as well. And it always brings this question to me: how did that person, he or she, punch me in the throat with 90 pages?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
like that's
That's
incredible,
a
right?
skill. Yeah.
Yeah, so I absolutely love a chunky book because that says to me, oh, we're gonna have some good characters, we're gonna have some good world building, and I
Yeah.
can get invested. I mean, as a fantasy fan, it's like, what more do you want than to be invested?
Yeah.
Kind of something to obsess over for a while.
Yeah, same. Like the way I lived in David Gemmell's world for so long, and his series, like his books, each of them stand alone. So in theory, you could jump in on whichever book you happen to find. But he builds on that mythos from book to book, so that the more you read them, the more you appreciate what he did in other books, and it's kind of it's a really interesting way to build a world. And I wish I had the skill to be so prompt that I could tell a story in just one book instead of needing 5 to do it.
Oh,
But,
I think it's a genre thing though too. Like,
yeah,
I mean, you see like James Patterson. James Patterson, that's his name, James Patterson. Yeah, very popular author, but he's also got these really long series. Or one that I thoroughly love is James Rollins, the Sigma Force series.
okay.
It's like 18 books long now, but they're also standalones. That's another skill,
They all
right?
stand alone. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a skill.
To be able to go into the 16th of 18 books that's still continuing on, will be more, and get into the story, love the characters, know who they are, without reading it from the very beginning. I find that very cool, a trait that authors have. It's really, really cool. But again, like I was saying, there's those that I want to start with book 1 and get totally sucked into where if somebody picks up book 3, they're going to be so lost
Yeah,
because
yeah,
you have to be committed. And I
yeah.
love those stories that you have to be committed to.
That's part of why I'd like to do some standalones where, I really love the world, but I'd like to offer people the opportunity to kind of dip a toe in and have a full story. And hopefully if they like me, they'll stay and read the other stuff. But if I I'd like to have the also just the skill of writing a complete story in one book. It's something that I clearly need to work on.
As a market, so as a storytelling, I totally understand that. And even if
Yeah.
we're talking marketing real quick, one thing that I didn't know was a marketing strategy that worked on me and in a good way. Now, I'm not saying that this was like something I was tricked into. Uh, I heard a lot of things about Ryan Cahill, and
Oh yeah.
he has these huge books, right?
But
And
he's also got the little skinny. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
started with The Fall. It's like
Yep.
93 pages, and I'm like, dude, yes. So
Yeah.
I'm in there.
Yeah.
As an author, to market yourself through a novella, I see a lot of people doing them through newsletters or however you do it is a great way to um, not be intimidating to anybody who is like, oh, I think I would really like that story. Let's kind of see
Yeah.
if I enjoy her prose or his prose. And
Yeah.
as a marketing point, I think it's wonderful. Um, so, kind of, real quick, back to your process. Are you a pantser? Are you an outliner?
Yeah. Um, it, it's kind of hard to tell just because, like I said, Brightwash, that first draft, kind of became an outline for these 3 books that I'm now working on. Because the draft was structured in such a way that after I finished it, I cut it into 3 pieces and went, okay, that's going to be book 1, Brightwash. That's going to be book 2. That's going to be book 3. So, arguably, I wrote an outline a long time ago, but at the time it felt like drafting. I don't know. So it's kind of hard to tell. I think I'm somewhere in the middle ground between the two, because the one that I'm working on now, um, it was supposed to be a short story, for the anthology that I did, with Virginia McLean, um, the Alchemy of Sorrow, which is the one about grief in
Mm.
science and fantasy. Um, so I wrote that short story. It was supposed to be 10,000 words, so like just a really skinny one. I gave up at 20,000 words. It was very clear that I was never going to get it short enough to fit, and I pivoted to something else. And I put that story on the back burner. And I'm working on it now. So arguably, I have an outline for how it's going to go, but now I'm going to make it into a full novel. So
I
some
think
kind of hybrid revisionist middle ground where I edit
so.
the heck out of things. Yeah.
When I ask this question, a lot of the times I get that I hear I'm right there in the middle, and it's much broader than that. And I like that
Yeah.
you talked about you wrote this, which you at the same time you thought you were drafting, and that just kind
Yeah.
of ended up being a really info packed outline for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that kind of seems to be the difference between drafting and outlining. Because no matter which one we're doing, that first effort isn't finished, and I think it comes down to how much details you put in. Like Connor, for example, um, is definitely an outliner where like that first thing that he does is like pretty much bullet points of this and then this and then this. And that's not me. I don't do that. I definitely write prose, but the first couple of drafts are so sparse. um yeah, bullet points. So for me, the first couple of drafts are definitely prose, so they read more like a book, but it's so sparse that it's almost an outline, because sometimes like it'll be several pages of dialogue and nothing else is happening just because I need the beats of the conversation down. So is that an outline? I don't know. Is it a draft? I don't know. It's kind of whatever. And then I fix it later.
No, and that makes hearing that, it makes sense. So I could see how. So for me personally, I have to say the reason I asked this question isn't just to ask it. It's like I've tried pantsing, and
Yeah.
no, sir, no, ma'am, that's
Yeah.
not me at all. I get lost, and then tomorrow I'll be talking about complete, not cohesive,
Yeah.
and won't make any sense. So what I found myself gravitating towards is kind of in the middle of what you're doing, like having an outline, which before I tried the pantsing ordeal, it's like I feel like if I outline and I know the ending, or if I know where I'm things that are going to happen, it's not going to be fun. I found that to be absolutely false.
Yeah. Yeah.
Having that idea of where the beginning, middle, end, some things that happen in the middle of those still allows me to have that creative freedom that makes writing enjoyable.
Yeah.
So just because you know where you're trying to head does not mean that in the moment you aren't making magic happen. Uh,
Yeah.
and I've had to kind of convince myself of that. And I love to hear the sort of story you told. It's very unique to you. And I think all of these stories are, when I hear about writing process, very individual.
Yeah. Um yes. I'm gonna say yes and no. Well, actually, yes. So um part of the biggest problem that I had with Brick and Bone as I was writing it was I didn't know how that book ended. And I also didn't know how the series was gonna end. I only had really vague ideas. So um at the time I made the deal with myself that I was gonna stop working on Brick and Bone for a couple of weeks so that I could figure out an ending. And I have it now. And I'm not the kind of person that's going to change it if people guess it, because I'm not. I know I'm not smart enough to outsmart readers. I'm just going to keep going. um, so I know how it's going to end, and I know how book 3 is going to end, and I know important beats that are going to happen in the middle. But other than that, it's still really open. Um, so that
That's
kind of speaks to what you were saying, where it's like I have these really important moments that I know I want to keep no matter what,
mm,
and they act as guideposts, like a map almost of, okay, like I can't see the path, but I know I'm trying to get there, so I just got to get closer to there. And it helped me triage all of the problems that I was having with Brick and Bone, where there were um too many threads that didn't help me. But once I knew what that ending was going to be, it was like, okay, I can see very clearly I need to cut this, I need to cut this, and I need to focus on this. And then after that, it was gravy.
kind of
So
like focus your
yeah.
mind to get to that. That makes a lot of sense, man.
Yeah.
That's really speaks to. I say this all the time, but I don't always get to talk to you, so I want to say it to you.
Yeah.
That I started this channel to find knowledge, to just always in pursuit
Yeah.
of learning. And you've just really helped me personally in a lot of the questions that I had. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
No,
And
I'm really glad. I'm really glad that it's helpful, because having more storytellers is ultimately always a good thing. So yeah.
and I think a lot of people too. I have to say I commend the way that you answer questions. A lot of people, um, I wouldn't say a lot of people. I guess just in general, when someone's asked a question about what they do or something specific, it kind of puts a little bit of nerves on it. And you've really went in depth with the answers you've given me and thought about it. And I can tell they're genuine through your
Oh,
experience. And I don't always get that. So thank you.
oh well, I'm glad, and I'm gonna agree with Bard. Too many side quests make for a muddled story, he says, and it's like, yeah, that is exactly the problem that I had with Brick and Bone for such a long time, because I didn't know where it was going, so I didn't even know what the main quest was. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. It,
um so it was like entirely side quests, and then knowing where I was trying to go, then it was like, oh yeah, okay, I see now all of the stupid thousands of word tangents that I've wasted my time on, and then cutting those away became really easy.
that's really cool too. Just that experience speaking again. I wanted to say too, J. Patricia Anderson, thank you for
Oh,
being
hey
here.
Jackie.
Lovely to see you here. Wonderful. Part of my, along with the two books that are published so far in Tainted Dominion for my 2024
Oh,
reads. Daughter of Tith will be up there too.
I'm gonna run away because I have.
Go grab it. We're
Yeah,
live. Absolutely. It's beautiful, by the way. Oh my
I have
goodness.
the other one.
Oh
Her. So
yes.
the two the two sides of J. Patricia Anderson is the chonk and the skinny, and I'm really jealous. I need to do this next, the skinny.
So have you read this?
I haven't read it yet, but it's
I've
so
never
gorgeous.
felt
I
I've
couldn't.
never felt a book more in my life. You feel this book
Oh,
with all it's so good.
that's really exciting.
I can't usually, and I'm almost there with your books, by the way.
Oh,
And I'm being honest with you. My wife is not a diehard fantasy reader. She loved this, and she's
okay.
like, I think I have
Ask a
another.
question.
Yeah, yeah, and she's almost there with reading Legacy of Brightwash because
Bright Watch. Yeah.
she is. I have to say she's not into like an epic knights and swords and all that sort of stuff. To give you an example, maybe John Gwynn, somebody who I love very much, she
Yeah.
would never be into,
Yeah.
but she is digging the vibe.
Oh, I'm
So
glad to hear it.
I absolutely. I loved that you talked about a bunch of different things, but especially the knowledge and the experience that you've talked to us about. A couple things that I love to ask as well is we've touched a little bit on it, but I like to ask it again just because I always get something a little deeper. What are you working on now, and what's next for you?
Well, right now, like I said, I'm working on that the short story turned novel, and then I'm also working on Legacy of Ash and Stone, so book 3. So the short story, it was titled Coyote. It's about Ozra, who we meet in Brick and Bone, and it's kind of Western if Westerns took place in logging camps, Canadian logging camps. And it's a little bit horror because the forest is haunted and
All
stuff.
right.
And it's very much about Ozra's journey before he walks into the story. He's a man who I made the decision that instead of the normal rhythm of a book is that normally characters start out okay and then they hit a low point and then they come back up. But Coyote starts with Ozra at his lowest possible point. And it's his slow slog back up until he's well enough, if you will, to come into Brick and Bone. So it's horror vibes because it has a lot to do with grief and loss and what it does to us.
Mm.
But also a Western in the Canadian logging camp, like I said. So
Something that really resonates with me, and I just have to say, is those stories of a real grief and loss being low.
Yeah.
When you said it enters at his lowest, it's like, man,
Yeah.
I usually can relate with I relate with those characters. I've had
Yeah.
some times in my life where it's been pretty dark and certain things
Yeah.
bring you out of that, but I seem to just gravitate towards just that type of character.
Yeah, I really like writing about Ozra. His melancholy really appeals to me sometimes. And I think it's important, for those of us that are kind of a mess to be able to see ourselves in this genre that we love
Mm.
so much, because I have total respect for heroic fantasy where the good guys are the good guys and that's the end of the conversation.
Mm.
But it's nice to vibe with the rejects sometimes, and the
I
the the sad boys and the complicated loners who just I don't even know if Ozer's a good guy. I couldn't tell you. He's just doing his best.
He is who he
After
is.
Yeah, and so and I love me a western, a sad boy western. So it's kind of that meeting point between where natural fantasy themes meet with my time period, which is like 1890s, which in North America was pretty wild. So
Yeah,
um
that's
uh
incredible.
yeah.
I think.
And then
Go ahead.
yeah, and then the other one is Ash and Stone. So that one opens on a riot. I won't say where, I won't say with who. And then it just gets crazier from there. So that one is kind of like, the brakes are off the the tram, and we're rattling down that chaos track.
Yeah.
So
I have to speak on the title for the short story. For a darker feel and a Western theme, Coyote, man. That is
yeah.
a wonderful title.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely digging that. And so very excited for everything that you're doing. I love to hear the ambition. I love to hear the future projects. It's very exciting. And I also would love to hear a few people you recommend I speak with in the future, even if I've had them on, because
Oh,
I
okay.
absolutely would love to have multiple people back on.
Well, speaking of westerns, Clayton Snyder. So tell him that I said this because it'll make him really uncomfortable. But Clayton is my ride or die. He was the first indie writer friend that I made. I made friends with Nick Borelli by accident, and then I got included in like a Follow Friday that Nick did with Clayton, and this was back in like 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And I beta read Clayton's
Old
what was
West.
it? It was River of
Oh,
Thieves.
oh,
So
okay.
yeah, not even Cold West. I also beta read Cold West. So but River of Thieves, and we clicked, and knowing Clayton and kind of hanging out with him and just getting to know him, he's one of the reasons I decided to self-publish today, or 3 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
And I adore him, and I feel like he's kind of underrated as a part of our community. So I would love to see more Clayton exposure.
Yeah.
And he's a Spiffle finalist this year. I
Sure
did
is.
not vote on his book because I beta read it. I had to
To be
bow
able
out.
to insert the type of magic that he put in Cold West with
Yeah,
a gritty kind
yeah.
of Western, dude, he just nailed it. Like he
He
did.
yeah he always takes stories in a direction that I totally could not have seen coming. And beta reading for him is a wild ass ride. But you know, I really respect the way he kind of very stubbornly pushes along. Yeah,
He's a
so
fellow
definitely
six fiver.
oh
He's
yeah,
tall. He's tall.
oh
So
yeah,
I'm 6'5".
he's a beast. Yeah,
And when I talked to him, he's like, "Yeah, I'm 6'5". I was like, "Bro, there's not many of us." And by the way, it's any friend of Krystle's, any friend of Michael R. Fletcher's or
yeah,
Anna Smith Spark,
yeah. Mike's
is
great too. Yeah.
absolutely friends with Beard of Darkness. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah.
You guys are awesome. I love the hearing about the love you have for somebody else's prose or
Yeah.
how they write is just wonderful. It just kind of speaks back to what we were saying about the community.
Yeah.
So Clayton, for sure.
Yeah, Clinton for sure. Oh man, I feel like
There's
I
so
forget
many
everybody.
people.
Yeah, there are. I think I I think you were just on with Adam recently, weren't you? So
Adam
that
Holcomb,
kind of yeah,
yeah,
or
but
yeah,
he's another one I'd love to have, but I can't wait to see what he does next.
yeah. I can't wait to
Um,
see what he does next. I really enjoyed um, Gam
oh,
Gam.
Gam Gam,
I'm
yes,
really looking forward to Bounty Inc. I've been hearing about because he was working on Bounty Inc. I think before we knew him,
yeah.
we collectively, um, and then he took a break, if I'm remembering correctly, and did Gam Gam because Connor and I bullied him into doing. Um, and so he keeps going back to Bounty Inc. And I'm like, I feel like I
That's like
played
his big
myself.
novel he had planned.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. It's a sci-fi, and it's like I played myself by delaying Bounty Inc. because I want to read it so bad. I've been hearing so much about it. So
Adam, how does
um,
that feel, man? You know,
that
Krystle and
he's
so
been
many other
bullied.
people. It's like
Yeah,
so many people are looking forward
Adam
to
is
this.
awesome.
What you're doing, man. I love. So you absolutely answer that question in the most wonderful way. I love that. Clayton is a guy that I had a real short talk with him before, but I plan to have him
Yeah.
back on once I read some bigger novels. I've only read Cold West.
Oh, you should have Andy Palinquin on if you haven't already, because
Andy,
so he's a he's a like I saw yeah, I've got one of his novels on my shelf too, and I got to beta read a novella that he's going to be putting out shortly,
ooh,
um, and he's amazing. And also, like, he showed a picture of like all of his books on a
dude,
table or
it's
something
so
like this
freaking
stack,
tall.
and it's like goals,
Yeah, dude,
right?
like
So I'd love
not a
to hear
single
what he has
duplicate.
to say. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I
Uh,
know.
love it.
Yeah,
Love that.
I think he would be a really really interesting person to talk to, and he tries to like pretend that he's not, but I'm not buying it.
He's a humble guy. He
Yeah, he's
writes
great.
so good. I have so he
Yeah,
sent me his book, A Dark Blade Assassin, a long time ago, and I'm
yeah.
almost through it. I'm one of
I'm gonna
those
go
mood
grab.
readers. Absolutely. So I'm one of those mood readers, guys. That it may take me a while to get through a book, and even more so, like having 4 children, but we're out of the newborn
Yeah,
stage. I've got
yeah.
some
I feel you there, brother.
yeah, and yeah. Krystle and I, we both have 4 children, so we
Yeah,
know but the struggle is real,
yeah,
folks.
yeah. So I've got this. So, oh
Ooh,
god, child of the Night Guild.
that's like his
So this
grimdark.
is yeah. So this is, I guess, the character's an assassin, and it's got guild politics and all of that stuff. So the novella that I beta read takes place. It's the same main character, and I guess I don't know if it's later or earlier. I'll find out when I read it. Anyway,
Yeah,
I liked the novella so much that I asked him, like, is there anything else with this character? Because I need more of her. She's amazing, and that's how I ended up with this one. And I guess he's doing Kickstarters of special editions of this series. So everybody should
I
go check out Andy's incredible work. Like, he blew me away. What the amount of world building and like what the fuckery in that novella
absolutely.
is just like masterclass. So I can't wait to see what he does with it. So yeah,
That's
he's
really cool to
fantastic.
hear. So he checks a lot of boxes, right? He's a
Yeah,
community guy. He's a writer. He's got
he's
experience.
so supportive. Yeah,
He is, and
yeah,
it's funny. I love to hear that too because there's like certain people. In fact, like he's such a community guy that when I had like 10 subscribers, he was like, "Hey, I noticed you're starting up a YouTube channel. I write," and I'm like, "Bro, I know. Like, I know who
yeah.
you are. You are
Dude, I
not.
know. Yeah,
Bro. I know who you are. Like, I can't believe that you reached out to me, bro. I was like over
yeah.
here sweating thinking about messaging you, but he's
Oh
just that
man.
kind of guy.
Yeah, and I remember when he picked up Brightwash and he started tagging me, and I was like, "Oh no!"
That is
um,
awesome.
but I guess he liked it so much that he like pivoted into other romantasy, and it's like that is the ultimate compliment. Where like I converted this man from grimdark to romantasy also.
I have to relate with him in a way.
Yeah.
And I feel
Yeah.
the thing is when Connor, I remember the talk. Me and Connor were chatting about his wonderful book and being an SPFEO finalist this year. And you were commenting, you were being so supportive and so
Yeah.
wonderful. And,
I was
and I was like,
heckling.
yeah, I was like, so, okay, that's how I gained to know about you and your books.
Yeah.
And just, it was really cool seeing, you ever have one of those moments where you forget where the hell you were going? I just had one of those
Yeah.
moments. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. Well, I was saying how Andy pivoted into romantasy because of me, and that was like just such a high compliment. Where I guess I exist in this overlap between grimdark and romantasy in such a way that it's working for people. I'll take it. I don't know. I don't know what I did right. Oh, I can't hear you anymore. Oh no, we lost him. You're muted now.
How about now?
Oh, perfect. Now you're back.
We're back, guys. You know,
We're back.
so it reminded me. What I was saying is, what attracted me to absolutely wanting to read your book is he'd classified it as a grimdark
Yeah.
um, romance, and, and
Yeah.
and that intrigued. Like, if you were like, okay, this is a fantasy romantasy, it wouldn't have had that same effect to me. But the grimdark romance part is just it sucked me in, and I feel like I'm going to be very much in that same category because
Yeah.
I'm not a huge romance guy, but at the same time, I'm not against that either. And I think
Yeah.
getting those elements that I love in fantasy with that's going to grow that love.
Yeah, and that's certainly why Brightwash ended up the way it did, where I felt there was a time where that element wasn't there so much, and so there wasn't any hope in the story. There wasn't anywhere for them to go. It was all just really bad. And it made it so that I wasn't enjoying working on it anymore. Oh, you're gonna make me blush. Um, I wasn't enjoying working on it anymore because there was nothing redeeming. There was
Ooh.
nowhere to go, and so I added in the romance between Toshua and Stella, uh, if only because my own ability to learn to love saved me from my aforementioned dark periods. And I wanted the same for Toshua, and I knew how bad things were going to get for him, and I felt that if he had something to hang on to, it was going to be okay for both of us to make it through this story. And so it became a balancing, like a counterweight to all of the big heavy themes that I really wanted to talk about. I didn't want to make them smaller, but by giving them something to fight for, love and family and community and the capacity in which we love each other romantically and as a family and as a community is where we get the strength to fight for things and to make things better. And I felt like adding that layer in it just made it a story that I was excited to tell. Yeah. So
I'm very thankful that you told us that because I think there's a
I'm gonna get
lot there,
emotional. Yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
there that people can grab a hold of. Connor said it earlier, making things tangible. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I can absolutely relate, and I think so many people can. That is probably my favorite part of this whole interview so far. So thank you for sharing that. That's not always. It's very courageous. It's very it's brave.
Yeah.
It's
I
not
mean,
always easy to do.
anybody who knows me knows that I'm totally willing to be a sap on live
That's a
television.
great human trait. Being able
Yeah.
to talk about yourself, the goods, the bads, the others, and oh my gosh, I love it. I absolutely love that. So guys, we've got so many boxes we've checked here. I've got some experience. I've got some writing tips. I've got some wonderful books that probably diving in tonight because I don't think I can wait. Just really exciting, and to hear about your ambition, to hear about what you're coming up with next. I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for letting
Well,
me borrow you. I know you're busy.
well, I mean, I have to thank you for inviting me on. It's always a lot of fun to come and talk about books and shit, you know?
Yes, books and shit. That should be like my
Yeah,
thing. Like, come talk about your books and shit. I love
yeah,
that.
exactly.
Let's do it. Oh man. So I hope that I'm not bugging you in the near future when I'm like,
No, no.
hey, can we come back and like talk again?
No,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
awesome.
I'm down.
All right. So thank you so much, Krystle. I know that
Thank
you're
you.
busy. I really appreciate letting me borrow you and your beautiful mind and talking about your beautiful work. You guys that were here live, I know
Thank
you
you.
enjoyed it just as much
Yeah.
as I did. Gosh, you guys were wonderful commenting away. It's so cool to see that. And for all the wonderful people who will watch us in the future, I thank you too. And tomorrow, remember what I told you earlier when I tried
Yeah,
to
that
think
you
about who
couldn't
the hell?
remember.
So yeah, I will put
You're
it on my Twitter.
you're interviewing someone. They probably wrote books.
Yeah,
I bet a
that
lot
is,
of people likes them.
yeah, that's a good, absolutely. We can bet on that 100.
Yeah,
But yeah, I do this thing where I like totally blank out at the end. But I
yeah,
will check my schedule because it is a little bit busy and I absolutely
yeah.
love talking to everybody. So when I check that after this, I will throw it up. Krystle, again, thank you. And we will talk to you guys tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you very much to everybody who came. The chat was awesome, and I'm sorry I didn't get to answer all the questions, but yeah, that was a lot of fun.
When you're like conversing, it's very hard, and
Yeah,
it's a skill that I'm working on. And if I missed anything, I'm so sorry, guys. I love all of you. Thank you again.
yeah. Thanks.